Did you think that kickbacks, lobbying, and endless budget embezzlement were merely diseases of our modern age? Far from it. In the 19th century, thousands of Russian soldiers marched into battle, clutching antique junk only because fat cat generals in Saint Petersburg spent years furrowing their brows over blueprints while waiting for the right bribe to slide into the right office. While the army bled out, officials weren't choosing the best caliber. They were choosing the most profitable payoff. We are about to reveal the filthy underbelly of the Russian Empire's great rearmament. While official history sings praises to wise commissions, we will show you the reality. A world where brilliant inventions were drowned in a bureaucratic swamp, and heroic officers were a thorn in the side of staffroom rats. Nikolai Baranov was a legendary figure who single-handedly challenged the system. He created a rifle that could have changed the course of history, only to hit a brick wall of official indifference. This is the story of how weapons progress in Russia has always pushed through, not because of, but in spite of the state apparatus. But what happened the moment the heir to the throne himself stepped into the game? Why did personal promotion from the Tsarevich make the generals turn green with envy? And what price did Baranov have to pay for his audacious success? In Russia, there is a tradition. Until the higher-ups deliver a magic kick, the system will do nothing but imitate activity. For years, generals sat in the halls of the artillery department with pointedly pensive expressions. But don't be fooled. Their wrinkles weren't caused by concern for the soldier, but by the agonizing struggle of how to drag out the process as long as possible, without losing their government stipends. Officially, this was called testing. In reality, it was sabotage. The Weapons Committee became a private club where time was measured not by rate of fire, but by years of meetings. Why make a decision today when you can schedule 10 expert reviews, drain the budget, and write yourself a bonus for analytics? It was the perfect feeding trough. The longer the army went without weapons, the longer the officials remained indispensable. They furrowed their brows over Baranov's blueprints as if they were looking at black magic, while in truth, they were just waiting for the designer to surrender or pay up. This bureaucratic theater was paid for with the blood of soldiers still fighting with junk from the Crimean War era. But when this endless consideration began to threaten the nation, the Krunka rifle was laid upon the table. Why did Baranov's project cause such a biliary convulsion among the professionals? And who was standing behind the scenes of this drama? It was a battle fought in offices where the rules were changed on the fly. At stake were multi-million ruble contracts, but the Weapons Committee had already handpicked the winner. Why was the Austrian Krunka system being dragged through by its ears, while Baranov's domestic design was branded a dangerous misunderstanding? The technical duel turned into a farce. The Krunka rifle was a foreign entity, requiring massive patent payouts. Baranov, meanwhile, proposed a system for converting old muskets. Simpler, more reliable, and cheaper. An obvious choice? Not for the officials whose pockets were growing heavy with Western promises. When Baranov's rifle outperformed the favorite during trials, a deathly silence fell over the room. Instead of acknowledging his success, the experts began to drown the project in petty grievances about the sound of the bolt and inelegant ergonomics. They hoped the inventor would fade into the shadows, but Baranov proved to be a tough nut to crack, and the bureaucratic dam began to leak. The weapons mafia was certain they would devour this upstart captain. But they underestimated his connections. You won't believe whose hand pulled the rifle out from under the rug, giving it a royal promotion. Imagine a marketing campaign that no amount of budget could outmatch. The future emperor himself takes a rifle deemed unfit by officials and declares it the best. It was the 19th century equivalent of a media explosion. When Tsarevich Alexander sided with Baranov, chaos erupted in the offices. The weapons mafia realized their plan had collapsed. The heir to the throne, the future peacemaker, had an instinct for falsehood. Seeing the commission bury a domestic design, he went all in. The Tsarevich personally tested the weapon, becoming the most influential influencer of the era. His verdict was brief. Baranov's rifle was superior to its foreign counterparts. For the bureaucrats, this was a catastrophe. How could they justify purchasing the Krunka system if the future Tsar had publicly chosen an alternative? A frantic shuffling of documents began.
Yesterday's detractors suddenly started singing praises to engineering genius, fearing the heir's wrath. But behind the celebrity endorsement stood a man whose biography was even bolder than his blueprints. Baranov decided to prove the superiority of intellect, not at a firing range, but on the high seas. Are you ready to find out how an engineer turned a civilian tub into the terror of the Turkish fleet?
Nikolai Baranov was the embodiment of fury and intellect. With one hand, he drafted rifle bolts. With the other, he signed death warrants for enemy ships. The weapons mafia of Saint Petersburg expected this lowly officer to suffocate in bureaucracy. But Baranov proved to be a predator who simply shifted his tactics. Baranov was enraged by the empire's sluggishness. When his rifle began to drown in a sea of approvals, he headed to the front lines of the Russo-Turkish War. While admirals debated the impossibility of action, the outcast engineer took command of an ordinary steamer. He proved that victory is won not by the number of guns, but by the speed of thought. His transformation into a sea wolf was terrifying. Baranov created a precedent that sent shivers down the spines of both the Turks and his rivals in the capital. His audacity confirmed that engineering insight in battle is more effective than golden epaulets. But how do you turn a civilian tub into a cruiser capable of taking on an entire fleet single-handedly? Baranov pulled off the technological bluff of the century. Ahead lies a night hunt that went down in history under the top-secret seal. To turn a civilian tub into a terror of the seas? For Baranov, it was a matter of calculation. While admirals insisted that war was impossible without ironclads, he pulled off the bluff of the century. Baranov proved that with brains and daring, you can mount cannons even on a trough, creating the perfect machine for naval terror. Baranov was given the steamer Russia, designed for cargo, not duels. But he approached the task like a weapons engineer. In the face of a cruiser shortage, he had to improvise. In just a few weeks, the vessel was bristling with artillery, transformed into a high-speed warship. It was a defiance of doctrine. Baranov created an ersatz cruiser on the fly, thumbing his nose at regulations and the mockery of the professionals. He bet on hit-and-run tactics, speed, and surprise. While St. Petersburg debated budgets for decades to come, Baranov created a combat unit in the here and now. It was engineering audacity, turning a target into a predator ready to hunt in icy waters. The Admiralty expected Baranov's disgrace the moment he encountered the enemy. But the night of December 13th, 1877, silenced the critics forever. Get ready for the chronicle of a daring raid where 800 soldiers and the wrong rifle decided the outcome. The ICC, 800 soldiers, and a suicidal assault. While the admirals and their offices calculated risks, Baranov went all in, a St. George's Cross or a court-martial. The night of December 13th, 1877, changed the rules of the game for the Turkish fleet forever. Off the coast of Anatolia, Baranov intercepted the Messina, a massive transport ship laden with troops and resources. Utilizing the speed of his cruiser, he closed the distance under the cover of darkness. The Turks didn't immediately realize they were being attacked by what was, until yesterday, a merchant steamer. The landing party acted with surgical precision, a lightning-fast interception, and the suppression of the enemy without a wasted shot. In this battle, Baranov's rifle and rapid strike tactics proved their power more effectively than any proving ground ever could. While the committee in St. Petersburg was still furrowing its brows over blueprints, soldiers were forging victory with that very same bolt. Capturing a vessel of such scale with a single improvised cruiser was considered impossible. It was a triumph of will over bureaucracy. But the real shock awaited the victors in the cargo holds of the Messina. They discovered something there that silenced even his bitterest critics. Are you ready to learn the price of that boarding action, measured in hundreds of kilograms of precious metal? Of precious. Have you ever seen the moment when the patience of staff room crooks finally snaps? It's when a disgraced officer brings home trophies that dwarf the budgets of their own schemes. Baranov didn't just capture a steamer, he hit the jackpot. 262 kilograms of silver and mountains of gold became the ultimate verdict for those who had labeled his rifle unpromising. The cargo holds of the Messina turned out to be an Aladdin's cave. In addition to prisoners, Baranov discovered colossal assets intended for the Turkish army's supply: precious metals, currency, and strategic reserves. This success had the impact of a bombshell. It's one thing to argue over blueprints in a quiet office. But it's quite another to present the captured gold of the enemy. Baranov proved that his engineering genius and audacity brought the empire tangible profit. The silver of the Mercina became the ultimate argument. A hero with such trophies simply could not be ignored. Yet it was this very glitter that blinded his enemies and triggered a new wave of hatred in the capital. In Saint Petersburg, gold is loved more than heroes, and the successes of upstarts are never forgiven. While Baranov was receiving congratulations, the ministries were weaving a web to strangle his reputation. How decide?
In St. Petersburg, gold was prized far above heroes. While sailors cheered for Baranov, a web was being spun in ministerial offices to dismantle his reputation. The weapons mafia realized that if they allowed a hero with trophy silver to dictate terms, their schemes of kickbacks for foreign rifles would come to an end. A campaign of office harassment began. The heroic capture of the Mercina was twisted inside out. In the headquarters, they whispered that the success was a fluke and that the Turkish captain had been bribed. Instead of an award, they suggested Baranov face a court-martial for insubordination. Members of the weapons committee, who only yesterday were studying his blueprints, were now frantically searching for an excuse to declare the rifle obsolete. Despite the triumph in battle and the Tsarevich's support, the bureaucracy switched to a total lockdown mode. Trials were dragged out, results were falsified, and factories were handed over to the Krunka system. This was the system's revenge against a man who proved more efficient and honest than an entire ministry. They hoped that time would erase Baranov's name. But the archives preserve a truth that turns this dispute into a detective thriller. Why did the foreigner ultimately enter the army, and where did the blueprints for the perfect Russian rifle vanish to? We are entering the home stretch. Missing blueprints and rigged shooting trials, the story of the Baranov rifle is more gripping than a spy thriller. Why did the empire choose expensive payouts to the foreigner Krunka, ignoring a model approved by the Tsarevich and tempered in battle? Who killed the hope for domestic supremacy? In this detective story, the criminal was the system. While Baranov was capturing the Mercina, St. Petersburg was forging shackles for his creation. The Krunka system was one of their own for the lobbyists. Contracts were signed, shares were distributed. Acknowledging the Baranov rifle would have meant admitting the incompetence of the GAU, Main Artillery Directorate leadership, who had spent years choosing the inferior option. Consequently, the blueprints drifted between folders and vanished into the archives under the weight of reviews by anonymous experts. Technical excellence was sacrificed for bureaucratic tranquility. A weapon ahead of its time failed to pierce the armor of official greed. It is an eternal cycle. The genius creates, the hero conquers, and the bureaucrat buries. Yet, Baranov's legacy lives on. Let's analyze why we keep stepping on the same weaponry rakes, and what lesson this sea-wolf left behind for us.
The story of the Baranov rifle is a harsh indictment of bureaucracy. While some furrow their brows, waiting for instructions, others take responsibility and emerge victorious. Why is it that in our history, the hero is always to blame, while the efficient official ends up smelling like roses? Nikolai Baranov proved that a single man with a clear mind can replace a fleet and outplay lobbyists. His rifle never went into mass production, not because of defects, but because it was too honest. One didn't need to pay millions to foreigners for it, and it offered no opportunity to siphon off testing budgets for years on end. It is a tragedy. Innovations only move forward through manual override from the very top. We keep stepping on the same rakes, entrusting the fate of our weapons to those who have never held them under fire. The silver from the captured Mercina has long since been melted down. But the question remains, how many more brilliant ideas will rot in the archives, while yet another committee deigns to make a decision? This series of articles is only just beginning. Ahead lie scandalous revelations, from the defects of the three-line Mosin-Nagant to the intrigues of Soviet designers. Are you ready to learn the truth they don't print in encyclopedias? Don't believe the ceremonial portraits or the dry lines in textbooks. The history of Russian weaponry wasn't forged in the silence of offices, but in fierce disputes, budget brawls, and midnight boarding actions. Today, we saw how a single officer engineer managed to terrify an entire imperial weapons mafia. The story of Nikolai Baranov is a manifesto for all those who believe in truth and the power of intellect. We witnessed how a Tsarevich became history's first royal marketer, how a civilian steamer became a cruiser, and how bureaucracy swallowed a great invention. Remember, behind every caliber and every bolt stand human ambitions, gold, and betrayal. We will continue to drag forgotten names into the light and expose those who prevented Russia from being first. Read between the lines of official reports, and remember, on the proving ground of history, only those who know how to ask uncomfortable questions survive. Which rifle will be the next in our sights? In the next installment, we will break down the secret caliber that made the Empire's enemies tremble at the mere sound of a reload. Subscribe to the channel. Here we talk about weapons without censorship or compromise.